Hey guys, I'm sorry for the long wait of almost a year. I took way too much time making this single video as well as deciding to stop the production of a previous one, which made me lose even more time. After uploading this video, I will continue doing that one. I hope that after many experiments with edits and such was at least worth. Anyways, talk to you later. Hey guys and welcome back to my dimension. We are back at Jojo's, that manga anime that I talked about a year ago in two previous videos, which I do recommend watching. However, since the first video got copyright strike, it lost some of the audio in the process. Therefore, I may redo them in the future. This part, unlike the previous parts, will be divided into videos since it has more meaningful stuff to talk about from every episode. Anyways, like last time, we will talk about the story from episode 1 to 22, the more relevant characters from the part, the deaths from meaningful characters, and lastly, I will give my final thoughts so far. So without further ado, let's start. For the story, I'll be dividing the story by arcs. Well, mini arcs, because one arc can go from 1 to 2 episodes or more. But in this first half of part 4, it's mostly made up of mini arcs. And to begin with, we have... This arc is the one that introduces us to the story, with the comeback of our previous protagonist, Jotaro Kujo, trying to investigate something that is going on Morio, our main story's location. When Jotaro arrives, he meets a high schooler by the name of Koichi Hirose, who will stick around for the whole part as one of the most important characters to the story. At the same time, both Jotaro and Koichi see how a bunch of high schoolers are messing with someone else, who is Josuke Higashikata, the one Jotaro was looking for. And after getting his hair insulted, unleashes a stunt and scares them away by beating his leader up. Jotaro afterwards tells him some information like who his father is, Joestar, who had him at the age of 62. How the fuck? Also, infidelity coming from Joseph, that's unexpected and sad for Sushikyu. Anyways, Jotaro also showcases some pictures of some stunt user that's making moves on Morio, which both Yosuke and Koichi encounter and stun him, but like that gaining an enemy. Yosuke does stop him once again, but at the same time escapes by also killing his grandpa, who was the one who imprisoned him years ago. Josuke, after his grandpa died, decided to take the torch and protect the city that his grandpa once protected. Jotaro and Josuke do eventually capture him with a tricky way, thought out by Josuke, and they do get some answers to how he obtained a stunt power by a bow and arrow, and how that has a connection to Dio, before Josuke makes him into one of Morio's milestones, the Angelo Rock. After the events with Angelo, both Koichi and Josuke, after a day in class, walk by an abandoned house that is near Josuke's house, and Koichi, after seeing someone through the window, gains a bit of curiosity and decides to look a bit around, before he gets stopped in a painful way by Okuyasu Nijimura, and then gets shot with the standard rope by his big brother Keicho Nijimura, to try to make him an stunt user. Also, I didn't explain this earlier, but if you are alive after getting shot by the standard rope, you gain stunt abilities, and if you die, you don't. So after that, Okuyasu and Josuke start a fight, with both their stunts, Sahando and Crazy Diamond. Okuyasu's Sahando is so strong that they literally needed to make him stupid so that it isn't overpowered, just for the fact that it can simply kill you by erasing space with his right arm. However, Josuke ends up defeating him by doing absolutely nothing and letting Okuyasu hit himself using his powers so that's cool, I guess. He later on goes after Keicho, whose stand bad company is really powerful. And it's basically an army with all kinds of stuff, but in a small size version. Also, Koichi ends up alive after getting hit by Josuke and also gaining a stand, an egg. Trust me, this isn't going to be like this all the time, although it would be funny, not gonna lie. After beating Keicho, we get the revelation that he's trying to get a stand user to kill his dad, because he can't die on his own. Since he made a deal with Dio, and after he died, he got some kind of infection. That's why Keicho was shooting everyone with a stand arrow, because he was unable to kill his own dad. Okay, cool and understandable, I guess, but you did kill all those people that didn't survive to the stand arrow. Keicho actually ends up dying after another stand by the name of Red Hot Chili Peppers kills him through electric cables, which led Okuyasu a bit depressed, but afterwards starts rolling with Yosuke and Koichi, thus making him a more important character to the plot. As for the bow and arrow, it is now on the other guy's hand, so there is a new objective here. Later on, the story starts going a bit more about Koichi and how he evolves as a person, by being less afraid of facing problems, more mature and less dependent on others. First, we have a case that happened with Tamami Kobayashi, another one of the stand users that is in this town. His stand the log, which makes everyone who feels bad for him make them pay the prices that he orders. Like for example with Koichi, after quote unquote killing his cat, to pay him 500,000 yens, which doesn't work thanks to Josuke and Okuyasu. But Tamami takes it so far to also involucrate his family, which makes Koichi mad because he was taking advantage over his family, thus evolving his stand from a questionable leg to a long-range functional stand. Because Act 1, I'll explain in the character section his acts. This stand writes down words of sound effects, and all those sounds are produced whenever someone touches it or gets hit by it. He's able to beat this guy and also made him his servant or something like that. Big W for Koichi. The next one isn't really important, neither to the plot nor for any character, besides the fact that it's mostly related to Josuke rather than Koichi. But hey, at least you can see more of his improvement in here, so that's something. Also, I don't really care for this guy since he only appears like 2 times or so. Just gonna name drop him here. However, later on, we do get an actual threat for Koichi. Her name is Yukako and she also has a stand ability. But it's not like a ghost one like the rest of the cast, it's actually her hair. Don't ask how nor why, remember this is Jojo's after all. Its name is Love Deluxe. And well, she can manipulate her hair to her desire, even throw parts of it to other people, to be able to control them. That's cool. Whatever, I'm getting off topic. Yukako is a yandere who's fallen in love with Koichi, and she's so crazy that she tried burning down another girl just because she told Koichi to clean up one of their classes while he was talking with Yukako. And if that wasn't enough, he also kidnaps Koichi during the night to one faraway house by blocking him from going out whatsoever. Luckily for our boy, he gets to shine once again by evolving his stand another time to Echo's Act 2, which works similar to the previous act with the main difference that instead of doing the sound of what is written down, it does the effect. Eventually, Koichi defeats Yukako, but unluckily for him, she still likes him. I'm gonna talk about this episode briefly because it's not really necessary to know about it, since it doesn't add anything to the plot. The only reason to talk about it is to know the character in it, that appears in some moments later on. Tonio Trendi is an Italian chef who has a stand named Pearl Gem that makes food to improve people's health problems. Yosuke mistook this guy's intentions as evil and he was wrong. That's pretty much the episode. Moving on to something important. Well, after the date with Okuyasu, Josuke was in his house playing, doing nothing till he found red hot chili peppers in his house, observing him and the rest of the cast. He actually was trying to improve his stand to be able to beat Jotaro's Star Platinum. But after having a small clash with Josuke, he realizes it's still not enough. The day after, the crew met up in an empty place where there was no electrical stuff to let red hot. I'm just gonna call him Chili Peppers. His name is too long to keep spelling all the time. Where was I? Ah yeah, an empty place where he could not move around the electricity. Jotaro had a plan to bring Joseph to find out Chili Peppers' location with his stand Hermit Purple. However, Chili Peppers, with Okuyasu's bike, which had battery, was able to hear the whole conversation and tried arriving first to the port to kill Joseph so that they don't fight him. Okuyasu does get a great moment using his stand and is able to win the duel. However, due to Chili Peppers being able to easily manipulate Okuyasu because he's dumb, what a way to nerf a character power hierarchy. Okuyasu was strict to quote unquote kill Chili Peppers with Sahato to be able to cut part of the ground where there are cables that connect to the electricity and thus get in the way. Once they are in the port and wait for Joseph, Okuyasu and Jotaro get to them, while Josuke and Koichi stay to wait for whenever Chili Peppers appears, which he does. But so does his stand user, whose name Akira Otoishi is kinda useful for these reasons. 1. Why did he show himself if that's what he's trying to prevent from happening? And 2. It makes the purpose of bringing Joseph back kinda pointless, especially moving forward, which he really doesn't give me anything at all. Anyways, as a summary of the fight, Akira loses after getting his stand scattered on the salt water of the ocean, which is apparently supposed to kill him, which it doesn't, and heads to the boat without Josuke and Koichi to try to kill Joseph. However, Okuyasu is there, giving us a short yet funny gag about how stupid Okuyasu is, where he's trying to figure out who's not the Speedy Wagon employee. He directly hits Akira first. Didn't see it. Finish of the day, we have Joseph arriving at the port, where he meets with Josuke in an interview. It's honestly a really good moment for both characters. That gave us a special episode featuring both after. Speaking of it, this episode doesn't really add much to the story, but it has a lot to do with the relationship of these two characters. Josuke doesn't want Joseph to be around more for mostly because of his mother maybe feeling bad when she sees him. He goes so far to not even consider him his dad, which kinda makes you feel bad for Joseph, despite knowing he was the one who screwed up. After they found a baby with a stand ability that allows the baby to become invisible, they try to do what they can to help the baby, trying to find her parents, but in the end they don't find them. So Joseph ends up with her. Josuke was able to see Joseph with better eyes after helping the baby that wasn't his, and for caring that much for someone who doesn't even know whatsoever. It's a good episode that you should not skip. After the baby incident that happened with Joseph and Josuke, we have now Koichi and the other guy that I really didn't care for, Toshikazu Asamada, not because I hate him or anything like that, simply because he's worthless and doesn't do anything for the plot, which even Tamami Kobayashi which is kinda similar to this guy, did at least something for the plot, or for one of its characters. Anyways, let's just continue where I was. They both encounter and start talking about a mangaka by the name of Rohan Kishibe, who is the creator of their favorite manga, which apparently lives in Morio. They go to visit him, and as soon as they arrive, they get greeted by the man himself, Rohan, and he allows them in because they are fans. But afterwards, they find out a bunch of things. One is that Rohan acts a little bit weird when it comes to making his manga feel quote-unquote real, because he literally investigates everything, to the point of doing weird things like testing how a spider tastes. Jojo's been Jojo's, nothing new here. And the other thing is that he's a stand user. His stand, Heaven's Door, is able to read everything from a person like a book, even write on them to do certain action. And all of that can be done by just making them see a manga panel. That sounds broken, but it only appears in these 2 episodes. Anyhow, Rohan was able to use Koichi as his source for creating his manga, using his memories, thus making Koichi unable to do anything against him, because it was written down by Rohan. The next day, Koichi goes back to Rohan's house, not because he wanted to, but because his body was forced to go there, so that Rohan could use more of his memories. Both Okuyasu and Josuke find this weird, since he was going the opposite way to the school. Therefore, obviously they wanted to know the reason. Koichi couldn't tell them what was going on, because he was unable to say anything that counted as attacking Rohan, like asking for help. However, they still managed to know something was wrong with Koichi. Both Okuyasu and Josuke find out what is going on, and go inside the house to help Koichi. Okuyasu tried to do something, but failed and got controlled by Heaven's Door as well. Then Josuke tries to go and stop Rohan, going completely blinded so that he doesn't fall under Heaven's Door control. Rohan tries to open his eyes by insulting his hair, which is successful but also fails because he was blinded by its anger. Therefore it didn't work, thus defeating Rohan. Koichi explains why Josuke gets angry when someone insults his hair, and that has all to do with his past. It was in a snowstorm. Josuke had a high fever, and his mother Tomoko tried carrying Josuke to a hospital in the other town, but got caught up in the storm. Apparently, this was the same reason as what happened to Holy, Joseph's daughter and mother of Jotaro, in part 3. So it all had to do with Dio's return. The thing is that someone out there helped Josuke and her mom to get out of that situation, and that guy had the same hair that Josuke has nowadays, and because he saw him as his hero, he wanted to replicate his hairstyle. That's quite a neat backstory, not gonna lie.
射程内で見つけて外してる。ネズミは二度と射程内に入ってこないからな。命中すると確信するまで発射する。
After beating Rohan's ass, Josuke goes hunting with Jotaro, because apparently Akira used the bow and arrow to hit a rat. Well, actually too later on. Thus, trying to prevent something bad from happening with those rats. I have mixed feelings for this episode. For one, I like it because it has a mentor and student role with Jotaro and Josuke, especially because Jotaro was the previous Jojo and now it's Josuke. It's a perfect way of making Josuke learn to use his stand, even though he did most of the stuff in the Angelo fight, but whatever. Also, the animation and art style of this episode is good. Just look at it. Everything's so highly detailed. However, I hate this episode for how they nerfed the crap out of Jotaro. He literally lost to a rat, even though he has Saguardo and has used it quite a couple of times in this fight, yet he still lost. The worst thing is that it even looks like he's struggling more with this rat than with fucking Dio. How is that even possible? Was it really necessary to make Jotaro look so weak in comparison? Okay, maybe looking back at it, I maybe overreacted. To be honest, like I said before, Jotaro is trying to be the mentor of Josuke. Therefore, he's allowing Josuke to do everything in this episode. Because if he wanted to, he could do it himself. But to be honest, I don't really feel good knowing that a rat oversmarted Jotaro. That's still not feeling really good. Let's just move on.
So, その 女の子ってのは私なのよ。幽霊なの、アーノルドと私は。
After Rohan got his ass kicked, he finds Koichi around the town and tells him that he's a changed guy. Therefore, he should not fear him, because they are quite similar in a way. At the same time, he does ask him if he sees how the map of Morio is bad or something, because in the map there is something that it doesn't appear but can be seen by both Koichi and Rohan, which is an alley. They go to investigate a bit and see that there are only a few houses. They try using their thumbs to have a view of the whole place around them, but apparently there is something like an invisible ceiling that doesn't allow them to see from above, which made them think it's maybe a stand user's doing. They see a girl coming down the alley, and with Rohan's Heaven's Door, with a new look and different way of using it, try to see if she has anything to do with this. Fortunately, she isn't responsible for anything that's going on there, and aside from that, she doesn't have a stand, so that checks her out of it. This girl's name is Reimi Sugimoto, and after talking a bit, she tells them a story about a murder that happened 15 years ago in that same place. Once in a night, in one of these houses, there was a strange sound going. A repetitive, dripping sound came from the parents' room, which wake up the daughter of that family. She was a bit confused by the sound, so she tried calling for her parents. No one replied. However, she wasn't scared because she had her beloved dog beside her. Even at dark, the dog would lick her hand, which calmed her down. Knowing Arnold, the dog, was there. However, the sound didn't stop, so the girl decided to investigate and found out that the sound came from his beheaded dog's dripping blood hanging from the coat rack, and at the same time below his bed, someone stood up, telling her, "Your hand is so soft and pretty. I already killed your parents." And there, she also killed the girl. Reimi tried making it like a joke to scare both Rohan and Koichi, however, that wasn't the case. That beheaded dog from the story was in that same place, besides them. And then she explains that the girl is in fact her, and that Arnold and Reimi are both ghosts. Obviously, like a normal human being, Rohan and Koichi start running away. But for some strange reason, no matter how many times they passed from the quote-unquote exit, they end up in the same place. Reimi does explain to them that they shouldn't fear her, because she's not a vengeful type of ghost, aside from the fact they were the ones to come here in the first place. To add more, she also asked them to help her find the murderer, to put an end to the 15 years of murder he has been doing ever since he was killed. So after some time, both Rohan and Koichi do agree on helping her. Now Reimi will tell them how to exit this place, which is actually just going the opposite way, with a little twist of never turning around after passing through the post box. Or you'll go to the other world. In other words, you die. Interesting. They do manage to get out, but Koichi almost dies, because he got tricked to turn around to get him killed. Thankfully, Rohan used Heaven's Door on Koichi, making him blind, so that it didn't count as turning around to see. The LA that was there before disappears, but Reimi will always be there until they find the murderer. Also, after that, Rohan visits the graveyard where Reimi's family and her are buried, and an old man tells him that he was there when that accident happened. Reimi. He didn't remember that because he was 4 years old, so after all, there were connections between these two. Now, the final part of this episode does give a really big and easy guess to who can be the murderer of Reimi's story, and happens after Koichi tells the story to Josuke and Okuyasu. They do believe he's saying the truth. However, if the murderer is not an stand user, there's no reason to do that themselves and to let that to the police. For us, the viewers, they do give us a look into the possible murderer of the story. How do I know that? Because he has a woman's hand cut down and bleeding. We'll eventually see more of this guy for sure.
そうそう。はい、ジョスケさんに奥安さん、分け前の1万円だよ。
しげち、なんだこれは一体。
オラたちには友情があるんだよね。オラたち友達だよね。
おう、仲間だぜ。
だから友情の印だよ、それは。
Well, since I have been for longer than expected previously, I think this part doesn't really need such a long explanation. Since it doesn't really add up much to the lore like the previous one, the major thing to mention is the introduction to Shigechi of Django, better known as Shigechi, who's not gonna appear for long, but is really important either way. Shigechi is an stand user, and his stand is harvest. Unlike other types of stand, this one has more than one, in fact 500 in total. so it doesn't matter if you destroy 3 or 4 of them, it won't really take damage at all. He mainly uses it to collect money that he finds, and that's how he meets Josuke and Okuyasu. Both of them were really in need of money, so they try to convince Shigechi to use it to gain even more money. However, when they do, Shigechi gets blinded by the greed of getting lots of money, which ends up in bad terms, especially when they get 5 million yens, and declines to divide the money with Josuke and Okuyasu. They eventually are able to make him realize about it by beating him and telling him how greedy he was. This episode does give us a new type of friendship that both Okuyasu and Josuke at first used for their own gain, but later on accept him more for who he is, especially after an event that happens in the future.
Yukako-san! Koichi-kun! ってこれなんだわ。
This episode tries to move a bit from the Ryohei plot, so I'm gonna talk just a bit about it, since it's not relevant to the story, but deserves to be mentioned because one of those characters does have some type of important thing to do in the future, in the second half of part 4, so remember this for whenever I upload the next one. Here we have Yukako, a bit depressed by the fact that Koichi prevents contact with her whatsoever. She sees a girl coming out of some type of beauty shop, where apparently the beautician is able to make girls so pretty that they are able to find love easily. So Yukako tries it out. Aya Tsuji is the one behind the Cinderella beauty shop, and you guessed it, she's an stand user. And her stand, funny enough, is also called Cinderella. This stand allows her to be able to change parts of the body as freely as she wants, and she uses it to help other girls find love, because like that she's able to feel like the fairy godmother that helps Cinderella find love. That's sweet actually. However, after Yukako tries it the first time to get Koichi to love her that is, she isn't able to succeed, thus asking to change her whole body as a whole, which had some awful side effects, like losing her eyes and fingerprints. Koichi, after finding her in the beauty shop, does try to help Yukako to recover her previous eyes. He even admits what really made him fall for her was her personality, not her looks. I might be the only one that thinks that's weird, because that same personality made all of what happened in Yukako's side screw him, as well as making Koichi dislike her. But okay, I guess. Aya does give Yukako's eyes back, however there is a twist. She needs to choose between different yet similar eyes and eyebrows, so Koichi goes and picks for her, and it was a success. They end up as a couple in the end, so all things end well, I suppose.
Sa, いただこうか。そうそう、君にプレゼントがあるんだ。
Okay, hear me out for a bit. I lied a bit when I said it was from episode 1 to 22. It's still up to 22, but only the first half of it, because if I did the whole episode, I would need to include more episodes to the review, and it would make the next one have less in comparison. In these 2 episodes, we learn a bit more about the killer of Reimi, the one that appeared at the end of Reimi's episode. This guy apparently is a nobody who has a normal life and that doesn't really stand out among people. Therefore, as a killer, that's what he wants. His name is Kira Yoshikage. We are still not sure if he's an stand user or not, so he could be either a normal human or an actual threat. But it doesn't matter because it all goes down after a mistake happens. Shigechi, while he had a conversation with Josuke and Okuyasu, he gives them money, which they ask for because they don't have any. Thus, Shigechi wants to write down the debt they have to return to him later on. He sits down and a dog steals his bag. Shigechi notices that his bag is gone, and by mistake thought the one Kira was his, which worries Kira a bit. Why, you may ask? Well, because in that bag is the hand that he cut down from a woman, and that could lead to him getting chased by the police and such. If Shigechi opens the bags, that is, for Kira has no choice but to follow him all the way through to the school. Kira ends up in weird situations where he could have stolen the bag easily, but every time he was almost successful, he got screwed over by small inconveniences all the way through. Luckily, in the end, he took it back and escaped. Or did he? Yeah, no. Shigechi saw Kira with the bag, so he tried to take it back with Harvest. And well, the worst for Kira happened. The bag broke and Shigechi saw the hand. Obviously, Kira, after all of this happened, he needed to get rid of Shigechi to maintain his killer status unknown, thus delivering one of the most well-known quotes of this part, the "My name is Kira Yoshikage" quote.
私の名はキラヨシカゲ、年齢33歳、自宅は森王町北東部の別荘地帯にあり、結婚はしていない。
Which just lets all his information out for Shigechi because it doesn't matter if he knows all of it, since he's going to be dead after the encounter with him. And he also reveals his stand. Did you really think he wasn't going to have one? His stand is Killer Queen. His main ability is to transform everything he touches into a bomb. Therefore, he makes one of the gens that he has into a bomb, which Shigechi takes because he thought it was a weapon or something. And Killer Queen detonates it, making Shigechi explode. Shigechi doesn't die, however, Kira leaves a big wound on him by literally deforming his face completely. Shigechi realizes that this is indeed the guy people were looking for and the killer of Reimi. Using his harvest and strategy to hide himself, he's at least able to escape to go and try to tell Josuke about it. Also, something that truly makes me mad is these girls. Not only do they hit him with the basketball, but also despite seeing him bleeding, they just ignore him just because he's weird. Excuse me? How the fuck call someone weird when they are bleeding and completely fucked up? Ignore Kira because here is the true villain of the story. I still yet to understand why that is how it had to be played. Shigechi is able to find Josuke in his classroom, but sadly for him so does Kira find Shigechi, which leads to possibly the most heartbreaking moment of the character, doing whatever it takes to protect his family in spite of dying. And Kira, by activating a bomb that he already put in the knob door, kills Shigechi. Also, how do these people in the back not hear the explosion? For real, Araki, the creator, really wanted to kill this guy. At least for Shigechi died, he was able to give Josuke a button of his jacket that he was able to take during the encounter with him, which is huge because that could help in finding him. Josuke and Okuyasu get worried over the way Harvest disappears and go look after Shigechi. If Shigechi's death wasn't enough, would you like to see him die twice? Because he also dies going to heaven, which Reimi sees in the alley. Afterwards, all the stand users that we met, except some, have a strange feeling after Shigechi completely dies. So they meet up near the alley with Reimi, where she confirms Shigechi's death, and also says that he has surely been killed by her killer. This news did make Okuyasu and Josuke feel weird, because despite how greedy and annoying Shigechi was, he's simply someone you can't just ignore. At the same time, they now do have a reason to go after him, since Kira being a stand user would be troubling for everyone. Therefore, this is now their main goal in the story: stop Kira at any cost. This is what we are going to cover for now. Next time, we will continue from the second half of this episode until the last one.
グレートですよ、こいつは。
Now, we will talk about the characters I feel have been more important for this first half, starting with...
グレートですよ、こいつは。
Josuke Higashikata is the protagonist of this part. He is a high schooler that lives in Morio, Japan. He lives alone with his mother Tomoko Higashikata, and after meeting Jotaro, he gets told that his father is Joestar. He shares similar traits with the Joestars, like with Jotaro being charming and handsome to girls, as well as having a similar personality to young Joseph. But he also has a unique trait of getting angry when someone insults his hair, because that's the same hairstyle that his savior had when he and his mother got stuck in the snow while Josuke had a fever. That's why it's so precious for him. His stand is Crazy Diamond. It allows him to heal others when they are injured. However, he can't heal himself. Josuke has been able to use his stand in a lot of tricky ways, for both defensive ways as well as offensive ways. Therefore, it's really strong for combat purpose. Okuyasu Nijimura is the jobber of this part, basically the best friend of Josuke. At the beginning, he was an antagonist, but he changed to the good side in less than an episode. He's really charming and strong. However, he's really dumb for obvious reasons. And those are because they needed to balance him after giving him such a strong stand. His stand is Shahan. It allows him to raise the space around him with his right arm. It's pretty deadly and probably one of the strongest ones in kill power. It's kinda similar to Vanilla Ice's stand, Grip, which could do the same, but Vanilla Ice doesn't know what he raises while Okuyasu does, which is better in my opinion. However, being underutilized is kinda sad.
よくも許さない許さないぞエコスアクト1
Koichi Hirose is the other friend of Yosuke, and he's really important to the story. More than what you think at first, to the point where some people say that Koichi is the actual protagonist, because he's really involved in the story, sometimes more than Yosuke. Although it's obvious why that's not true. He isn't a Jojo, therefore he's no protagonist. Koichi is one of the characters that evolved the most in the show, to the point where even his stand literally evolves, thus the name has Act on it. His stand echoes Act 1 and 2, both of them work similar in a way. They have some differences, for example the range and the function. Act 1 has a range of 50 meters and his stand produces sound from whatever he writes down, and Act 2 has less range than the previous one. Not sure how much since it has never been stated before, but at least longer than the close range stands, and similar to Act 1, whatever is written down will do something. Instead of sound, it's the actual effect of the move. This is all for Koichi for now, since he still has some things to talk about in the second half. Jotaro returns to the show, but now he's in a minor role. However, he's still one of the protagonists of this part. He, as a whole, did mature and he acts like an adult, but sometimes you can see the old, well, in this case young Jotaro and his personality. His stand, Star Platinum, remains mostly the same, but he now possesses the ability to stop time after defeating Dio in the previous part. But not as long as Dio's 9-second stop time, but hey, better than nothing. He also stole the name of his stand, naming the ability to stop time Star Platinum Saguardo. That's an asshole move if I ever saw one.
スタンド使い
ああいかんぞしかい
Similar to Yotaro, Joseph is back for the third time, but now in an even minor role. He's just there, doing absolutely nothing. He still can use his stand, but he only does it once in this whole part. It's understandable why he doesn't do as much as before, because he's way older. Therefore, he suffers from natural problems after aging past 79 years. However, they at least could have used him for something more important, especially if you're bringing him back to do nothing. Rohan Kishibe, similar to Okuyasu. At first, he was an antagonist, that later on changes his ways to be helpful for the main crew, especially after hearing about Reimi's story and knowing he actually was involved in that same incident. He's a bit weird and takes his work way too seriously to capture reality in his stories. His stand, Heaven's Door, allows him to read memories as well as write down stuff in them to whoever he touches. This can be really threatening to deal with because of what it can do. Shigechi is probably the character that appeared the least, however he's been more important than characters that appear before him. He's a bit annoying and his greed can get to his head, but in the end he cares more for his family and friends, no matter what. His stand Harvest is a really powerful one. The fact that he can control over 500 at once allows him to be hard to defeat, because destroying 3 or 4 won't be enough to damage him. Sadly he passed away, but I'll talk about it later.
あなたわがままでしょう。あ あなた女の子に振られ
Reimi Sugimoto is a really vital part for the progress of the story. She is the first victim of our main bad guy, and thanks to her, our main characters have a main goal, which is to stop Kira for the massive amount of murders he committed for the last 15 years. Reimi is a ghost that lives in between the human world and the afterlife with his dog Arnold, waiting for the day that the killer is dead, so that she can finally go to heaven, knowing that the town she lives in will finally be at peace after 15 years. Akira Otoishi is a guitarist that wishes to fascinate everyone with his music, as well as the first main bad guy that we have. He obviously isn't anymore, because he's in prison and also Kira's sister. Unless he's truly the main bad guy that gets out to get vengeance on Josuke and the rest. Nah, I don't think so. In fact, he doesn't appear anymore after the Joseph and Josuke episode. Briefly, only in OVAs he appears. His stand is red hot chili peppers. He can use electricity to power up his stand, making him stronger and faster. He also can move freely through electric cables.
つまりシゲチ君、君は私の睡眠を妨げるトラブルであり敵というわけさ。
Kira Yoshikage is our main bad guy, who the crew will have to face in the future. We don't know much about him besides the fact he's been a killer for 15 years, that he likes woman's hand, not the woman, just the hand. That's a weird fetish, not as weird as feet fetish, I will say, but still weird. His stand is Killer Queen, and for what we know so far, his stand, whenever he touches something or somebody, he can transform it into a bomb, and then detonate it. In the death of Shigechi, we'll talk a bit more about him. But don't worry, he's still far from over, and we'll have to talk about him again in the second half. Now, to finish everything for now, I'll talk about what I think are the most important deaths in this first half so far, going from the first one to the last one. We have his death overall isn't really meaningful for the plot, but it's really meaningful for Josuke, and a change that makes him do everything he does in the series. Ryohei was a police officer that was widely respected by Josuke. He even was the one that arrested Angelo 12 years ago. Therefore, the villain in that arc killed him for personal reasons. This affected Josuke quite a lot, and decided to take the torch and continue what his grandpa worked hard for, the peace in the town/city of Morio. That's why the thing he does is stop Angelo of possibly doing the same to other people, like he did with his grandpa. Although the thing that Jotaro says is a bit weird, he says that stands can revive people no matter what. Then explain to me how you brought back Joseph from the dead, Mr. Jotaro. That's one of the biggest plot holes that I have ever seen. This death is quite meaningful for the plot, not only because it introduces us to the main bad guy at the time of the story, but also the bow and arrow, the main objective of the part at the time. Keicho's death, similar to Yosuke's grandpa's death, is quite meaningful for Okuyasu, because he loses his brother. Keicho didn't really treat Okuyasu well when they were both left, disparaging him and even hurting him with his stand, without feeling bad. However, he was doing it so Okuyasu could start learning to be less dependent on him, because he was always following him everywhere. Okuyasu, after seeing his brother's corpse in the electric line, he did say that he deserved a death like that, because he killed many people, thus not deserving a normal death. However, this is obviously made him feel pain. Luckily, he got to be friends with Yosuke and Koichi, which made him overall a better person.
Shigechi.
This death not only is the most important one for now, but it is also one that made me feel quite bad for. Shigechi, like I said, can be annoying sometimes, but that is because he's a kid, and kids overall are usually annoying. However, these types of people are the ones we can just ignore and we will miss once they are gone. Shigechi cared out for his parents and would put his life on the line just to secure their safety, which that is what he does. After the events with Kira and finding out who he is, Shigechi's life was set in stone because Kira would do whatever it took just to make sure he's not gone. And unfortunately, Shigechi had to be that one guy who saw this guy and his hand. What really makes me feel pain is what happens once he escapes. He tries to go to Yosuke, but when these girls just passed from helping him because he's weird, that's when it got me a bit mad. Like, how do you ignore someone who's bleeding and has his face deformed, instead of maybe calling for help? Sometimes stuff like this makes no sense. He's dead though, and the scream he makes destroyed me. I just feel pain for that, and if that wasn't enough, he also dies going to the afterlife in a similar way. Josuke and Okuyasu felt similar to how I expressed them here. Luckily, Shigechi was able to steal a button from Kira's jacket, so he gave them an opportunity to find him.
Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. Who doesn't know about this anime that hasn't been said yet?
Diamond is Unbreakable, as what we've seen so far in these reviews, it's probably the best part of the series for now. It doesn't have similar issues like pacing and overall repetitive tropes like it did with Stardust Crusaders, mostly the anime, since it was extended even if it was shorter than the next ones. But the manga still has the same aspects. At the same time, it doesn't have the villain of the week trope, which made it harder to see part 3, meaning that only a few episodes do show actual progress, the first ones and the last ones, which in due it was fixed or used better, as the antagonists of the arc or episode are still there but as side characters. In simple terms, part 4 simply outdoes the previous parts. Nonetheless, the main issue I see so far is the scaling or the way some characters were nerfed. Okuyasu has one of the strongest stunts, but he's really stupid, therefore he doesn't utilize it correctly. And Jotaro is actually a bit weaker compared to his teen version, aside from the fact he doesn't use Star Platinum at its best. I do have high hopes for what it has to offer in the next part, because for now it really shows how good it is. With that said, we'll end this first half. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, remember to leave a like, subscribe and hit the notifications bell to not miss any of my videos. Anyways, now I'll restart working on my next video, so get ready since it will possibly be my best video by far.
分けるのは